Welcome back to The Explainer, everyone. I'm thrilled to have all you clinical students and future eye care professionals here today. We are jumping straight into a clinical review that is absolutely crucial for your practice, mastering specular microscopy and diagnosing corneal endothelial diseases. If you've ever stared at a patient's scan and just wondered how on earth to interpret those tiny, chaotic cellular patterns, well, you're in the exact right place. We're going to decode all that imagery together, step by step. Our clinical review today is broken down into 5 key areas. We'll start with the principles of specular microscopy, then compare contact versus non-contact instruments. After that, we'll cover the markers of endothelial health, move on to identifying Fuchs's dystrophy, and finally wrap up by analyzing ICE syndrome.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the principles of specular microscopy. So understanding the physics behind the instrument is really your first step to becoming a master diagnostician. To put it simply, specular microscopy is this incredibly specialized, completely non-invasive photographic technique. It's designed specifically so we can visualize and, more importantly, mathematically analyze the corneal endothelium. We're looking at the size, the shape, and the total count of those cells. This beautifully simple principle basically relies on projecting light into the eye and then capturing the reflection right at that specific optical interface, where the refractive indices of the corneal endothelium and the aqueous humor actually meet. Because those two structures bend light differently, the interface creates a reflection that we can capture and analyze.
Now, you might be wondering, why do we care so much about this one specific layer of cells? Well, here is the kicker. Unlike the corneal epithelium, which, easily heals and regenerates over time, the corneal endothelium does not regenerate at all. Zero. If there's a focal endothelial injury, the loss of those cells is permanent. The tissue can literally only repair itself by having the surviving cells migrate and kind of stretch out, expand, to fill in the gaps and maintain continuity. So the absolute crucial point to remember here is that these endothelial cells are a finite resource. And that's exactly why this diagnostic tool is incredibly vital for lifelong patient care.
Moving right along to Section 2, contact versus non-contact instruments.
In a real-world clinic, you're generally going to run into 2 types of specular microscopes. First, you have contact specular microscopy. Just like it sounds, the instrument physically touches the cornea using a coupling fluid. Because this fluid has a similar refractive index to the cornea, it wonderfully removes any of those pesky surface reflections from your image. But as you can imagine, it's definitely less comfortable for the patient. Plus, if your sterility isn't absolutely perfect, there's a higher risk of spreading infection or mechanically scratching the cornea. In contrast, non-contact specular microscopy is entirely touch-free. It boasts fantastic patient tolerance and drastically lowers the risk of infection or damage. But there's a catch, right? Because it doesn't stabilize the eye physically, it requires significantly more experience from you, the clinician, to get a clear image. You have to navigate the patient's natural eye movements and their blinking. This brilliantly illustrates the classic clinical trade-off. Contact instruments give you a slightly easier time with reflections, but non-contact instruments are generally preferred for patient safety, even if they demand a steadier hand.
Okay, let's dive into Section 3, markers of endothelial health.
Now that we know how to capture the image, let's look at the actual data. What does a healthy baseline look like before we introduce the chaos of disease? Remember how we just said these cells don't regenerate? Well, notice how the cellular density dramatically yet naturally declines throughout a patient's life. At birth, a human has a wonderfully dense endothelium. We're talking generally over 6,000 cells per square millimeter. As that person grows into a young adult, around their 20s or 30s, that number naturally drops and settles into the 2,500 to 3,000 range. And by the time a patient hits 60, we expect to see an older adult baseline of roughly 2,000 cells. Understanding this age-related decline is absolutely paramount, guys. You do not want to misdiagnose natural aging as some rapid, aggressive disease state.
Let's talk morphology now, the actual physical appearance of the cells themselves. Healthy endothelial cells are remarkably uniform in size, and they form these beautiful hexagonal shapes. But when things start going wrong, we look for 2 very specific clinical terms, polymegathism and pleomorphism. Polymegathism refers strictly to a variation in cell size. So if you're looking at a scan and some cells are massive while others are tiny, that's polymegathism. Pleomorphism, on the other hand, is a variation in cell shape. This happens when the cells lose their healthy 6-sided structure and warp into irregular polygons. When you're reviewing a patient's report, you have to clearly distinguish between these two. A change in size is polymegathism, but a dangerous shift in shape is pleomorphism.
To quickly summarize our healthy baseline, any reliable specular microscopy report is going to hand you 3 primary mathematical parameters. First, you'll see the percentage of hexagonal cells, which essentially tells you how much pleomorphism is present. Second is the coefficient of variation, or CV, of the cell area. This quantifies the polymegathism, or that size variation we just talked about. And third, the overall endothelial cell density, or CD. Because again, these cells cannot regenerate, monitoring the cell density alongside that coefficient of variation gives us a complete, mathematically precise picture of your patient's endothelial survival rate.
All right, armed with that baseline, let's hit Section 4, identifying Fuchs dystrophy gatita.
Let's drill into our first specific pathology. The absolute defining characteristic you are hunting for when diagnosing Fuchs dystrophy is called guttata. Guttata is essentially this abnormal accumulation of collagen fibers right on the posterior surface of Descemet's membrane. When you capture a specular microscopy scan, the light just doesn't reflect normally off these little collagen mounts. Instead, they show up visually as these very distinct, prominent dark circles scattered all across the field of cells. Those dark circles represent that collagen buildup, and they are the definitive hallmark you absolutely need to identify for Fuchs dystrophy.
Let's turn this into an actionable workflow for you in the clinic. When you pull up a new image, just follow these 3 steps. Step 1, analyze the overall cell structure. Look for deviations from those normal hexagons. Are you seeing irregular polygons? If so, there's your pleomorphism. Step 2, scan the image specifically for those dark circular spots. If you see them disrupting that cellular matrix, you've found guttata. Step 3, if you find central corneal guttata accompanied by those morphological changes, you can confidently confirm the clinical diagnosis of Fuchs endothelial dystrophy. By strictly following this mental checklist, you're going to be able to instantly spot the warning signs on any scan that comes your way.
Finally, let's wrap up with Section 5, analyzing IC syndrome patterns.
For our last clinical comparison, we're looking at another severe condition, iridocorneal endothelial syndrome, or ICE syndrome for short. Now, while our focus today is specular microscopy, the diagnosis for this actually often starts one step earlier. If you use a slit lamp before you even bring the patient over to the specular microscope, you might notice something pretty striking. ICE syndrome typically presents with what's classically described as a fine, hammered silver appearance on the posterior cornea. It's a very unforgettable visual, and it's really your first major clue that you're dealing with ICE syndrome.
Now let's look at what ICE syndrome actually does to the specular microscopy report. On a perfectly healthy cornea, as we established earlier, you see crystal clear cell margins and regular, repeating hexagonal shapes. It basically looks like a pristine honeycomb. But when you look at a patient with ICE syndrome, it is honestly a visual disaster area. There is a total loss of clear cell margins. A lot of times you literally can't even tell where one cell ends and another begins. You'll see extreme pleomorphism, and quite uniquely, you're going to see dark areas forming right within the cells themselves. The stark visual contrast is wild. Those beautiful structured hexagons of a healthy eye are just completely obliterated by the chaotic, marginless dark spots. And that brings us to the end of our clinical review today. We've covered the physics of the microscope, the types of equipment you'll use, the markers of cellular health, and exactly how to spot both Fuchs and ICE syndrome. But before we go, I want to step back from the technical details for just a second. I really want to leave you with this thought to ponder for your future practice. If the corneal endothelium can literally never regenerate, how might early detection through routine specular microscopy fundamentally alter a patient's lifelong vision trajectory? Think about it. Catching those very first signs of pleomorphism or spotting a single guttata isn't just a clinical exercise for a grade. Recognizing these microscopic shapes early might literally be the key to saving a patient's sight. Keep analyzing those scans, keep learning, and I will see you all in the next explainer.